postpone motions for which notice was previously given and additional business.
Thank you. In favor or opposed, Councillor Gregg?
In favor.
Councillor Hamley?
In favor.
Councillor Kepke?
In favor.
Councillor Merton?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
In favor.
Councillor Tamming?
In favor.
Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
That is carried. We are now in the committee of the whole. At number 8 on our agenda, we have no public meetings. At number 9A, we have a deputation from Jason Kim, an Owen Sound resident, and I see him on there. Welcome. There we go. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. So good evening, Your Worship, Mr. Body, esteemed Chair, and City Council members. My name is Jason Kim, and I am providing this deputation as a private citizen of Owen Sound. The subject pertains to Agenda Item 16A, a motion by Councillor Tamming to defund the Owen Sound Police Services by 30%. I commend the strong wording of Councillor Tamming's motion and fully respect the facts presented. While crime has decreased substantially, I do believe that the Owen Sound Police Service has been diligently working to improve mental health supports. Through my own experiences, volunteering for a local event, police were required for an aggressive and inebriated patron leaving the premises. This patron was intending to self-harm, and I left the premises to assist the arrival of our police officers. During the time I was waiting for the officers, the patron was aggressive and even decided to take my portable radio. As a master of Taekwondo, I felt perfectly comfortable in the situation. Through the basic training provided by my career, I ensured this patron knew that help was always willing to be provided and that I was there to listen to any troubles. As soon as the officers arrived, they were professional, courteous, and caring. Though they were at risk, they calmly and politely de-escalated the situation. While officers of the law in Canada are generally respectful individuals, there is an element of care present in local services. I grew up in Durham, where the police services were also local. The officers always knew the townspeople, the events, both positive and negative, and of course treated every case with compassion. There is an identical component with the Owen Sound Police Services. I admit, I am simply a private citizen unaware of the full implications of budgetary concerns. Whether it is in Owen Sound's interests to defund the police services or not, I believe following the American zeitgeist is not presently prudent. To my current knowledge, budgetary concerns were addressed in January. There was an Owen Sound Police Services Board meeting held on November 27th, 2019, which Your Worship and Chief Ambrose were of course present for. On January 27th, Councillor Hamley moved to approve the operating and capital budget, and it was carried. Councillor Tamming moved to send the police budget back to the OSPS board, and it was defeated. It would appear that the time to complete budgetary items for the OSPS has passed. I am a local teacher, and I believe in the safety of all people, including the vulnerable. I used to cook noodles for over 200 homeless and led a group to distribute the noodles on the streets of Seoul, South Korea. Despite my personal views, I have a healthy respect for the bargaining process. Humbly, I implore the Council to defeat tonight's motion to defund the OSPS. Should defunding come up during the appropriate budgetary times, I leave it to the professionals to best deliberate upon such matters. Thank you, Chair, Your Worship, and Council members for this opportunity to speak tonight. All the best.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kim? Seeing none. That's great. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks. We'll move on with the agenda to public question period. Madam Clerk, did we receive any questions today?
Through Your Worship, I did not receive any questions.
Okay, so I remind the public, if you get questions in by early afternoon to our clerk, we will answer them as best we can at council at night. Number 11, we have no correspondence received for which direction of council is required. We're down to number 12, which is a report from Mr. Simmons. Mr. Simmons, you have a report at 12A with regard to city actions and decisions implementing the COVID virus from June 14th to June 26th. Please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and two members of council. So I guess one thing I'd like to point out that our notion to reports are to keep them brief and to the point, yet the reports on COVID updates continue to increase. It's up to 12 pages in length. And I think the only thing I can say about that is things are busy around City Hall and around Owen Sound. We have a lot going on that staff are tackling each and every day. When COVID hit back in March, it was turning that switch to an off position. But when we are turning things back on, there are so many other considerations that come into play, especially with safety being our primary principle moving forward. With that said, there are a few very good items in this report I wanted to point out. First is the expansion of the patios. Council, you listened and brought that motion forward a few weeks ago. It's been very, very well received by the business community. Those restaurants in the downtown and around the city of Owen Sound, patios are opened up. Just this weekend, I know experiencing it myself on patios, they were all busy, maintaining social distancing with all the tables, asking patrons when we walked in to hand sanitize, et cetera, using disposable menus. So you knew you were the only person using it. So it was good to see those safety precautions in place and the patios being filled and business coming back. Another two items, and these are on page 7 of that report, building activity and short-term rental relief at city facilities. Our recommendations focus around the short-term rent relief at city facilities. We've been approached by a number of our not-for-profits operating in city facilities, seeking a continuation of rent relief, at least through September. We as staff are recommending that we do that, and as the private sector and the provinces also urges tenants and building owners to work together, we see that as an opportunity for us also. The building activity and permit have never stopped through COVID. So staff have continued to review building permits coming in. We are slightly, construction value is slightly behind 2019. However, as we note in the report, what we have in the pipeline, so to speak, we believe that 2020, we will surpass 2019 building permit numbers, which is exceptional considering what's happening here and around the world. I'll also like to report, we had some very, very good news on the tourism front this past week. Our manager of community development had applied for a tourism grant in the amount of $75,000. We heard back from the province that not only were we successful, but they have awarded the city a grant of $150,000. They've doubled that. So now the work is underway to use that money and put a plan together. We think there's a great opportunity to partner also with the region and use some regional opportunities with tourism, et cetera, and bringing people into this area. And that recommendation is also contained in this report. So I think with that, staff have returned to City Hall this past week. They're all in place. We are still planning on opening City Hall to the public beginning July 6th with safety precautions in place. A media release was issued earlier today to that regard. And then we're also very excited that we hope that this is our last WebEx, Zoom type electronic meeting of council, and we'll be returning to council chamber for the meeting on July 13th, barring any sort of reversal of what's happening right now in Grey County. So with that, open to council for any questions. Thank you.
Council, any questions? I guess actually first I should move the report and have it.
Yeah, I'd move the recommendations, your worship.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion? I've got two questions with regard to council coming back into the chambers next meeting. Does Ms. Bloomfield want to do a cartwheel now or after it's over on the 13th? Other question at a more serious nature with regard to wastewater department, storage tank, biosolid clean out. We do that annually or every 2 years, as I recall. And will there be an expense of not different things, or do we know the consequences? And maybe putting in the spot that Dennis has to answer. But
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll ask our Director of Public Works to respond to that.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, Your Worship, there will be no issues. The main thing, the reasons why we are postponing that for the year, or deferring it till next year, is just dealing with the issues related to COVID-19 and the presence of the COVID virus within raw sewage. So we just want to work that out to make sure that we have the proper protocols in place to ensure the safety of our staff.
Good, thank you. Does that raise any questions with any council? Seeing no hands going up, hearing nobody yelling out, so I will call the question on Richard's motion to move the recommendation. So in favor or opposed, Councillor Gregg?
In favor?
Councillor Hamley?
In favor?
Councillor Kepke?
In favor.
Councillor Merton?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
In favor?
Councillor Tamming?
In favor?
Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
So that is carried. Thank you. 12B, Ms. Allen, COVID financial forecast update. Go ahead.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. Tonight's report is intended to provide a financial update and builds on the two previous reports presented in April and May. The overall estimate for the deficit has improved. However, this is mostly due to the inclusion of estimated surpluses that are not related to COVID, specifically in police and fire. Other small changes that continue to impact my overall estimate: interest charges have decreased as the city has yet to require usage of any of our line of credit by mid-June. I'm also aware that our debenture will be advanced in August, so hopefully we can avoid using that line of credit at all during this fiscal year. Total COVID-specific expenses, so those are costs that we have incurred that relate to COVID specifically. So for example, the purchase of PPE and those sorts of things. They're close to $90,000 currently. This amount, however, is the most likely to be funded by any provincial program geared towards the emergency and/or pandemic recovery. Fuel savings continue to increase and are now close to $70,000. We have seen an uptick in planning application revenues, and that is built on an development value in excess of $50 million. And then finally, estimated shortfalls in facility booking revenues continue to be the greatest risk area for lost revenues. Currently, my estimate is that we have a $450,000 deficit. However, there's an additional $500,000 at risk depending on what happens as we get into the fall with minor sports and organized sports through those fall and winter months. So overall, with the changes in assumptions, my current estimated deficit is around $500,000, with the additional revenue at risk up to $1 million. And I've attached for your reference the operating summary, which just shows what the deficit or surplus is for each major operating unit and what's driving it, as well as I've included our capital progress spreadsheets, which are something I often provide to council with my quarterly financial updates. And that just sort of shows you the status of all of the approved capital projects, estimated times to completion, and any comments related to those projects that staff have. So this is a report for your information, and that's it.
Councillor Tamming, go ahead.
I move acceptance of that report.
Okay, so it is on the floor. Councillors, questions for Ms. Allen? Councillor Thomas.
I don't have a question, Your Worship, just a comment. I'm hoping that Ms. Allen will bring at least 2 more reports of this nature, because the estimate gets lower and lower every time, and 4 reports from now will be at a figure that I think everyone could live with.
Or into the positive. Okay, anyone else?
I have a question of Kate, and perhaps of, yes, Ms. Coulter is on as well. The $500,000 we might have to pay with respect to or lose if we don't get organized sports in the fall. I'm wondering if through your worship, if Ms. Coulter can speak to that. Have there been discussions with some of the local organizations at all? Are they going to be completely dependent upon what Toronto tells them, or are they looking to fold their tents already? Do you have any sense? Because $500,000 is quite a hit.
Go ahead, Pam.
Through your worship, certainly we are continuing to monitor what the province is allowing in terms of recreation. Just on Friday or Saturday, there was some changes with respect to indoor recreation that we were hopeful may impact arenas, not yet. We certainly remain in close contact with groups like Onsell Minor Soccer Association. And, you know, I guess the great news is Kate's revenue projection wasn't assuming any revenue from field and diamond rentals this summer. So as you mentioned, the question really will come in the fall. And certainly, you know, our fingers are crossed that minor sports will be able to go ahead in the fall. It will likely look different, but I know in our facility booking area, we had 12 calls this morning respecting ice coming out of that provincial announcement. So people are really looking forward to doing some activities as soon as they're permitted and can be done safely in our facilities.
Thanks, Pam. Just to follow up to that, though, do we know, though, if of their own volition, some of these organizations are just inclined to toss the towel in? Do we have any sense from them? I'd like to know if I'm going to be playing hockey, for instance. Go ahead.
Through your worship, we haven't heard from any of the ice sports that they're looking at canceling their season, to the best of my knowledge at this time. I hope you're playing hockey.
Good, thank you. Any other councillors? Not, I'll call the question. So opposed or in favor, Councillor Gregg?
In favor.
Councillor Hamley?
In favor.
Councillor Kepke?
In favor.
Councillor Merton?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
In favor.
Councillor Tamming?
In favor?
Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
So that is carried. That was 12B. We're down to 12C, which is Ms. Allen again with regard to survey results.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is to summarize the results of the call to budget survey, which became open shortly after our last council meeting, remained open for a week, and then we've had the last week to sort of accumulate and summarize the responses that we received from council. Ultimately, 8 of 9 members of council completed the survey, and each of those detailed responses are included as an appendix to this report. Also attached to the report are recommended enhanced matrix and capital project template that I'll refer to. So I'll just quickly go through the questions that were asked and the summarized responses, and then that will lead me back to the overall recommendation that we're looking for council to move this evening. Question 1 related to timing. We had always planned to look at capital prior to operating, and council supports that, so we'll stick with the schedule that we had intended, which involves reviewing capital first in November, and then we'll look at the detailed operating budgets as well as a second look at capital in early December. That will put us on track to approve the budget at our first or second council meeting in the new year. The second question related to the levy that is geared towards capital and reminded council of sort of our asset management plan and what has been presented in the past. 6 of 8 responders said that they were in favor of a 1% dedicated increase to capital in 2021. And as such, our recommendation is that staff will move forward with that dedicated increase. It works out to be about $300,000 in additional revenue to capital. The next question was to try to get some of council's priorities as it relates to council. Overwhelmingly, seven out of 7 original responders identified roads and roads resurfacing as a top capital priority. Some responses had roads and roads-related projects as priorities 1, 2, and 3. Other noted priorities were sidewalks, economic development, improving the downtown core, facilities, and the Tom Thompson Art Gallery storage. So our action will be to maximize the asphalt resurfacing and roads maintenance program by allocating all of our full federal gas tax to that in the 2021 budget. That works out to be approximately $700,000. And then other projects that we will move forward with, we will do so with those priorities in mind. Following that, and along the same theme exactly, with respect to capital, we asked if there's any area that you feel has not been well funded or underfunded in the last few years, and 5 of 8 respondents noted again roads and roads resurfacing projects. So again, that supports our allocation of the federal gas tax. One respondent noted the downtown core here. With respect to capital, is there an area that you feel has been fully funded and should not require as much investment in 2021? 5 of the 8 respondents noted parks. 1 respondent noticed fire services. So when we bring forward our capital program, we'll be sure to highlight how many dollars has been allocated to each of these services, as well as all services, and how that compares to prior years. And then questions 6, 7, and 8 sort of all related to the presentation material that goes along with capital. Many of the responses identified a need for improved scoring metrics, improved documentation of impacts, and how we evaluate different projects in reference to each other. So one thing that I have included here is an enhanced capital detail spreadsheet that will include a discussion of each of these matrix criteria that we evaluate when prioritizing capital. And although this is something that we've always done in the past, we didn't always provide you with that matrix, but I think going forward we will. So not only will you see what the outcome of the matrix is, but you'll be able to see where each project falls within that matrix. And then question 8 asked council to sort of weigh the weight that you would put to each of those evaluation criteria. Unanimously, the most important item to council was the impact on operational performance. And then the sort of least important, I would say, in that list would be a project previously identified in a master plan or study. And then you can see the distribution of each of those criteria throughout. When also attached in that matrix that I have provided you, you can see that we've used these weights to weight each of those items as we bring projects forward. The next few questions relate to the operating budget, asking if council is in favor of presenting summarized service area budgets rather than going through those detailed line-by-line operating budgets. And this is consistent with what we've done the past few years. So save for some of the items noted in a couple other questions, I think we'll stay with that summarized information. Council will always be provided with the detailed budgets, but we won't go through the detailed budgets during our budget presentation. Is an increase in line with CPI a reasonable threshold for the net operating budget? 4 of 8 responders were in support of entertaining, I would say, an increase beyond CPI if that would allow for new initiatives. 3 of 8 responders were in favor of tying the operating budget to CPI, and 1 responder felt that the increase should be less than CPI. So going forward, staff will use CPI as a guideline for our operating budgets, and increases outside of CPI will be supported with a detailed business plan. Some of the areas that we will spend a little bit more time on, whether that is full detailed budgets or more enhanced staff reports, may reflect some of the items brought up by council that would like to have a bit more attention. Those include communications, the marketing budget, economic development, police was mentioned a couple times, a growth plan, fire, and the airport. So staff are aware of each of these items, and between either now and budget or during budget, we'll be able to provide a more thorough presentation on some of those areas. When it came to staffing related parameters, I think the majority of council pointed out that it is outside of their role to provide comment on staffing related parameters. So we'll move forward with a cost of living increase and any staffing related recommendations, not on council's direction, but with the city manager's support, and include those in our final budget presentation. The majority of respondents appreciated the variance analysis templates that went along with those operating budget changes, so we'll do that again consistent with prior years. In order to provide the detailed business plan for proposed service level changes, so new initiatives, major changes in staff complement, we'll be able to build between now and budget a standard business plan template to give staff time to complete those as well. Some new initiatives that council put forward for staff to consider in the next budget are a growth plan, communications plan, downtown pop-up shops, a focus on downtown strategy, looking again at transit and transportation, and source-separated organics. I don't think any of these are a surprise. A lot of those are on our minds already, but it's good to know that as a reminder that we're going to be considering those as well. And then finally, do you feel it's important to obtain public input in advance of council review? 7 out of 8 were neutral or agreed. And so I think that we have added public input as part of the scoring matrix evaluation criteria. While not necessarily the most important, it is one of the things to be considered. So a short, open-ended survey will be made available along with a dedicated email link for public input in advance of and during budget deliberations. With that, the recommendation in tonight's report is to move forward with budget development with the actions taken as noted in this report while adhering to the following guidelines. A dedicated 1% increase to capital spending, allocating the 2021 federal gas tax to asphalt resurfacing and roads-related capital, to keep ongoing operating activities in line with annual CPI, and to support any new initiatives outside of ongoing activities with a detailed business plan.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Allen. Councillor Thomas.
I would move the recommendations.
There we go. Questions, comments? Deputy Mayor O'Leary, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Worship, and through you, I have some comments. I noticed in this report, Director Allen, under analysis, noted that 8 of 9 members of council responded to the survey. That prompted me to speak up. I'm proud to announce that I am the 9th, and I completely filled out the survey on the 15th of June when the report came out. I put my name on the top, ready to hand in. It wasn't until June 22nd when the director sent out an email saying only 4 of 9 responded that I realized this survey was anonymous. So I am not and I will not participate in a survey that is anonymous as a member of this council. And so that's why I didn't respond. And I think since there is 8 of 9 in the mentioned in the report, that I should identify that and let you know.
Thank you. Other comments? Questions? Hearing none, I will call the question. In favor or opposed, Councillor Gregg?
In favor.
Councillor Hamley?
In favor.
Councillor Kepke?
In favor.
Councillor Merton?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
In favor.
Councillor Tamming?
In favor?
Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
So that is carried. We're down to 12D, which is a report from Ms. Coulter with regard to amended agreement with Grey Bruce Health Services.
Thank you, Worship. The city had in early April entered into an agreement with Grey Bruce Health Services under the provincial emergency order under the Public Hospitals Act to increase capacity to care for this community resulting from the pandemic. A fully equipped 75-bed hospital was established at the Harry Lumley Bayshore Community Center, and that remains in place. The original agreement had an end date of June 30th. On May 28th, Deputy Minister Mike Keenan issued a memo extending the time frame to September 30th. Staff were then contacted by Gary Sims, the president and CEO of Grey Bruce Health Services, about an extension. To assist in understanding the need, staff met with Dr. Ian Era respecting the public health need for this facility. Dr. Era explained to Mr. Simmons and myself the complex factors that go into such a consideration. In the meantime, I would note that Grey Bruce Health Services is amenable to certain other uses of the Bayshore Community Center, including the halls, the attack office, etc. And all their equipment has been consolidated out of those rooms onto the arena floor. Phase 2 of the provincial reopening for most of the province began on June 12th. And after approximately 2 weeks, which is sort of now, Dr. Era explained to us that it was important, it would be important to watch whether there was a steady number of cases, a small increase, or a larger, more significant increase. With these complex intermingle of facts, staff are recommending that we enter into an extension of the agreement to September 30th, generally subject to the same condition. However, there would be the addition of wording that allows for, after July 30th, the city to give 14 days notice for Grey Bruce Health Services to remove the facility from the center. So your worship, the recommendation is that council would receive the report and that you would approve a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the new agreement.
Great, thank you. Councillor Tamming, you moving that?
I move acceptance of that report. Thank you, Ms. Coulter.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Was that a hand up, Councillor Hamley, or?
I was just getting ready to unmute myself.
Okay. So I'll call the question. I'm not hearing from anyone in favor or opposed. Councillor Gregg?
In favor.
Councillor Hamley?
In favor.
Councillor Kepke?
In favor.
Councillor Merton?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
In favor.
Councillor Tamming?
In favor?
Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
And that is carried. I think Ms. Coulter again, 12E, report update respecting community safety and well-being planning.
Thank you, Your Worship. In January of 2019, there were legislative amendments under the Police Services Act that mandated every municipal council to prepare and adopt a community safety and well-being plan. There's flexibility in the legislation that allows the plans to be joint among municipal partners. At the request of this council, Grey County has really taken a leadership approach or a leadership role on a collaborative approach with Grey and Bruce County municipalities. The legislation also requires a multi-sectoral advisory committee with representatives on our committee from many groups and organizations, including the local LIN, mental health services, social services, children's services, etc. The legislation requires consultation with not only the advisory committee, but the public and community organizations. It looks for identifying and prioritizing risks, then identifying strategies to reduce those risks, and establishing measurable outcomes. A coordinator was hired to undertake and lead this work. Councillor Kepke was appointed by the Police Services Board. Chief Ambrose and myself also sit on the advisory committee. In November and December, there was significant work done to map the public assets, and then the online survey was launched. In Grey County, I believe there was 918 responses to the survey, and about 30% of those came from Owen Sound. So there was a lot of uptake on the survey here. Once the survey has been analyzed, it will identify priority risks, and then we'll evaluate our assets locally and leverage that into action. Once this is complete, the overall community safety and well-being plan will be drafted together with an appendix that's unique to the risks that are identified for Owen Sound, then assets and steps for action. The draft is expected to be available by September 11th. As council is aware, there were two public meetings scheduled for this past spring. Unfortunately, because of COVID, those weren't happening or couldn't happen, but the advisory committee is exploring future engagement opportunities relating to seeking public feedback on the draft expected this fall. So with that, Your Worship, the recommendation is just that council would receive the update.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I'd move that motion.
So council, discussions, questions, comments?
Councillor Kepke.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I just wanted to add to the director's comments, and thank you so much, Pam, for that thorough report. But I am pleased to see that Grey County did take the lead on the initiative, which was further led to a collaborative approach with both Grey and Bruce counties, with the exception of the municipality of Meaford. Owen Sound Police Service, and in particular Chief Ambrose, has been a wealth of knowledge and assistance to the Planning Committee, given his past experience with Waterloo Regional Police and exposure to larger and more frequent incidents in that region. I'm pleased with the 30% of Grey County respondents being from Owen Sound, which I think is a good representation locally. Following the completion of the draft plan in September, we look forward to the public consultation process. And Your Worship, I believe we're on track with our legislative requirement to have the plan completed by January 1, 2021, given the COVID-19 interruptions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will call the question. So in favor or opposed, and that is to receive the report. Councillor Gregg,
In favor.
Councillor Hamley,
In favor.
Councillor Kepke,
In favor.
Councillor Merton,
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary,
In favor.
Councillor Tamming,
In favor?
Councillor Thomas.
In favor.
So that is carried. Down to 12E, and I believe that's Ms. Coulter again with regard to technical report respecting Inglenook Child Care Center.
Thank you, Worship. This is a technical report on an application for zoning bylaw amendment as well as site plan approval for the former St. Thomas Church, as well as the manse located on 4th Avenue West. The proposal is to convert the former church to a daycare for Inglenook and also to sever the manse that had merged on title. There would be 11 parking spaces provided with the daycare. The applicant undertook a pre-consultation in late 2018 and made a formal application in May of 2020. On June 19th, the clerk provided a notice of complete application as well as the public meeting. The technical report provides an overview of all the standards and policies that are applicable to the project, including the provincial policy statement, the County of Grey official plan, the city's official plan, and zoning bylaw. The public meeting is scheduled for July 13th, and staff will make a full presentation of the application at that time. I would remind anyone watching from home that all information, application, and reports relating to the proposed applications are available on the city's website. So in terms of next steps, July 13th, I mentioned that we'll have a presentation from the manager of planning and the public meeting. And then to meet the goals of the Inglenook childcare with respect to timelines, Your Worship, following the public meeting on July 13th, your next meeting on July 27th, staff will bring our recommendation report, and we would ask council, if you're amenable, that you may consider the bylaw that same evening. So Your Worship, the recommendation is that council would receive the report, that you would direct the clerk to prepare for the public meeting, and following the public meeting, ask staff to bring forward a recommendation report for your consideration.
Great, thank you.
I move that that report be accepted.
Any discussion? So it's on the table. Any discussion? Any questions from any councillors? Seeing none, hearing none. Oh, Councillor Thomas.
I don't have a question. I'd just like to say what a wonderful use of a beautiful heritage building in the community. It's been for sale for a number of years, and I think whenever a building of that age is on the market for a while, you start to worry about what might happen to it. And so I just want to commend Inglenook Creche for bringing the plan forward, and I think it's a great use of that space.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? I'll call the question. Councillor Gregg.
In favor.
Councillor Hamley.
In favor.
Councillor Kepke.
In favor.
Councillor Merton.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Favor.
Thanks. Councillor Tamming.
In favor?
Councillor Thomas.
In favor.
So that is carried. So we're down to 12G on the agenda. Ms. Coulter again with regard to the use of Charlie Kelly Parkette.
Thank you, Worship. City staff had become aware that a neighbor, Bruce Hall, was interested in planting and maintaining the gardens at Charlie Kelly Park. Charlie Kelly Parkette is located at the west terminus of 6th Street East, right at 2nd Avenue. The park is classified as a neighborhood park within our park system. Access to the park is from sidewalks on 2nd Avenue East. As well, there is a city trail that extends to the park, connecting through the Bruce Gray Child and Family Services parking area to the Sydenham River Trail. The front portion of the park, and there's photos attached to the staff report, has been hardscaped with raised beds and benches, and the rear has hard surface paths and then grassy areas. Until late 2018, this park was subject to a lease with the Family Y for use with their daycare. The Recreation Parks and Facility Master Plan provides some helpful policy that guide our consideration of this request. The plan notes that parks and recreation have a large impact on people's health, well-being, and happiness, and improving where we live, work, and play, and participation in recreation can result in a more cohesive community. It also gives importance to volunteers in the delivery of community programs as well as events. Working with a neighborhood volunteer to create a garden that could be enjoyed by all neighboring residents is consistent with the master plan. Going forward, the development of a formal adopted park, trail, or perhaps a garden program may be beneficial and would be one way of implementing this section of the master plan. Staff will examine that as part of our work plan for 2021. The master plan also has an 8-step process for the transition of Parkland. In this case, the park has transitioned from a busy lot playground to a quieter park that is generating less use. The proposal to plant gardens in the green space adjacent to the existing hard surface pathways does not transition the park in a way that is not a park type use, and the application of the 8 steps would not apply in this instance. The city has a community garden policy that has been the foundation of partnerships with groups like Canadian Mental Health, as well as the Georgian Bay Garden Club, and created parks that are enjoyed by many of the community. Community gardens have many benefits, including mental and physical health, social engagement, sustainability, positive environmental impacts, and contributions to civic pride. The proposal to add gardens to the existing green space at Charlie Kelly Parkette is generally consistent with the policies of the city's community garden policy. A license agreement for the use of this park is recommended. The agreement is a fairly standard agreement with a 2-year term with a 6-month cancellation clause. In 2016, the city approved a 6-month encroachment agreement for raised flower beds on lands to the rear of 608 2nd Avenue East, the home of Mr. Hall. If a further encroachment is requested in this area, staff are recommending that we would follow the normal city process. Through the work on this garden, staff became aware that there was also an access agreement to the Hall property that had expired in 2012, and we're just recommending that agreement be renewed with a new 10-year agreement that would be transferable or assignable to any new owner. With that, Your Worship, the recommendation is that Council would receive the report. You approve a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute a license agreement for a 2-year term for the community garden. You would ask the Manager of Parks and Open Space to visit the park and provide some written recommendations to Mr. Hall with respect to best standards and practices. That you would approve a bylaw to authorize the access agreement, and you would advise Mr. Hall that any further request for encroachment to erect fence on city lands adjacent to the trail would be subject to the city's normal encroachment process.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Move the recommendation.
You want to comment on it while your microphone's on? Or?
Well, I could comment. I think that, you know, as the director mentioned, this is a park that since the Family Y daycare was relocated has really not had the kind of use that it once had. I mean, we've all driven by there in the past number of years and seen it filled with children playing. And I think that this is a good use for it in view of the fact that its uses have changed.
Great, thank you. Any other councillors? I can tell you if Councillor Lemon was here, he would point out that Charlie Kelly was a long-term councillor during the 70s, was the guy that made Winter Carnival happen, which was great fun in Owen Sound. He had a son named Sean Kelly that was one of the original editors and writers for National Lampoon magazine. Councillor Deputy Mayor O'Leary would maybe point out it used to be a Esso gas station in that corner, and on a hot day the beer truck tipped there and apparently poured beer all over the streets back in the 60s. But, well, Councillor Lemon would remember that. I'll call the question. In favor, opposed, Councillor Gregg.
In favor.
Councillor Hamley,
In favor.
Councillor Kepke,
In favor?
Councillor Merton,
In favor?
Deputy Mayor O'Leary,
In favor?
Councillor Tamming,
In favor?
Councillor Thomas.
In favor?
So that is carried. Ms. Coulter, it seems to be your night. We're down to 12H with regard to Community Improvement Plan extension.
Thank you, Worship. Last report for me. So a community improvement plan is a municipal planning tool under the authority of the Municipal Act, Planning Act, as well as the Ontario Heritage Act that establishes for a council a comprehensive strategy for community improvement, such as brownfields, heritage, or our ever popular facade and structural improvement program. In 2020, the provincial policy statement places high-level policy direction that supports CIPs for redevelopment, brownfields, downtown revitalization, as well as heritage conservation. The city has had a CIP since 2005. In 2019, the county approved their first ever community improvement plan, and it's really important that we undertake a conformity exercise with the county plan so that projects within Owen Sound can leverage the county's CIP as well. In order that projects on August 1st, our plan will expire. We were somewhat short-staffed in planning for a while. We now have a full complement, but with COVID and a high volume of planning applications, our staff are a little bit behind in their review of the community improvement plan. The process to do it is very similar to an official plan amendment, so we have to give notices at public meetings. This review, I would note, will be done internally by our own staff and not by a consultant this time. So with that, Your Worship, we would recommend that Council authorize an extension of our community improvement plan to December 1st, 2020. To allow for staff to complete the update and conformity exercise with our community improvement plan.
Thank you for that report, Councillor Tamming.
Yes, I believe a property that I own is covered by this report.
To the heritage property tax rebate, yeah.
So I apologize. I should have alerted council to that earlier. Somehow it slipped in. I did catch it at the committee level, so I'll just absent myself now, if I might, Your Worship.
Okay, go ahead. Councillor Thomas, I'll get you to, I'll maybe wait a second. Mr. Thomas, I'll get you to move it.
I would move the recommendation, Your Worship.
And any discussion, council? Any questions?
Through Your Worship, it's Councillor Merton.
Go ahead.
My question to Pam is 4 months, considering what's been happening, is that enough time for your staff? Or, you know, we want to be reasonable with this. It's an important project. Do you feel the 4 months is reasonable to be able to achieve this?
It's a very good question, and although I'd read the report and have been talking to staff about their review, I can't tell you that I didn't wonder today if we shouldn't make the extension till December 31st. So, Councillor, if you would be willing to perhaps request Councillor Thomas consider that a friendly amendment, staff would certainly appreciate the extra time given the prescribed timelines that we need to abide by to do the review.
I'll go to Councillor Thomas.
I would definitely accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
Councillor Merton.
Yes, thank you. If we can extend that period of time to December 31st to allow staff to be able to do this, that would be great.
Councillor Thomas has amended his motion to indicate December 31st. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Hearing none, I will call the question. Councillor Gregg.
In favor.
Councillor Hamley.
In favor.
Councillor Kepke.
In favor?
Councillor Merton.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
In favor.
Councillor Tamming. Oh, sorry, he's removed himself due to pecuniary interest. Sorry about that. Councillor Thomas.
In favor.
And that is carried. Somebody can get Councillor Tamming to come back in. Both councillors have entered the room and are heading for their chairs. I'll go to verbal or oral update from Deputy Mayor O'Leary with regard to Grey County Council and Grey Bruce Board of Health.
Thank you, Your Worship. Savannah Myers presented the Grey County Economic Recovery Plan. Staff have developed a draft Phase 1 recovery plan to assist in regional recovery. Underlying the entire plan is the need to enable our local entrepreneurs through facts, confidence, and support. The Economic Development and Tourism staff have identified a combined $135,000 available to refocus on COVID-19 recovery. This money will be applied to specific pandemic recovery-related marketing, communications, and support. The Business and Enterprise Center has received endorsement from the province to amend the Starter Company Plus program to assist small business with transitions through the pandemic. This approval allows staff to refocus the $58,000 grant fund in small increments of up to $2,500 for entrepreneurs, while enhancing meaningful training opportunities with professional services. Brent Fisher is very active on a daily basis, working with Savannah on behalf of our local businesses through the recovery period. And a small report on public health. Most of the conversation of late is the discussion on the usage of masks. There's a lot of conflicting reports, with some municipalities mandating masks and others are not. Dr. Ira's response to the mask question is as follows. I strongly recommend that people wear a mask, especially indoors at public places where you are unable to maintain the 2 meters of distance. In response to, I think it was Mayor Edie, who asked about people being upset about people not wearing masks, Dr. Ira said, people being upset because others are not wearing a mask is not a reason to mandate wearing masks. The reason we are not mandating the usage of masks is because our numbers are manageable. So that was the end of that. Dr. Ira spoke briefly about reopening and said the province has been very consistent with information. The faster we can open safely, the better we'll be long term. And finally, Dr. Ira remains optimistic about a vaccine, but also warned it would take 3 to 6 months for mass distribution. That's my report.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Deputy Mayor O'Leary? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 13 is the consent agenda. Ms. Bloomfield.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, on the consent agenda this evening is a report respecting an operating agreement with Charles Buoy for the operation of the boat launches, minutes from the library board, and the information package.
Great, thank you. Who's got that? Go ahead.
I do.
Push the button.
Moved by John Tamming that City Council receives items 13A through 13C on the consent agenda dated June 29, 2020, and further that the recommendation contained in 13A be approved.
Great, thank you. Call the question. Councillor Gregg.
Favor.
Councillor Hamley.
In favor.
Councillor Kepke.
In favor.
Councillor Merton.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary. Deputy Mayor O'Leary, we didn't hear you.
Sorry, in favor.
There we go. Councillor Tamming.
In favor.
Councillor Thomas.
In favor.
So that is carried. Councillor Thomas, nothing to report. Anything to report, I guess.
Not much from the library board minutes. It was mostly pandemic planning and that meeting. I will draw council's attention, though, to the fact that we do have a new 4-year agreement for library services with the municipality of Meaford, which is a good news story all around.
That's great.
Yes, it is.
Good.
They approached us.
Good. Any questions from anyone? Hearing none. Did vote in that, yes. Number 14, we have no committee minutes. Number 15, we have no postponed matters. Number 6, given Councillor Tamming.
Yes, I had previously indicated 2 weeks ago my intention to bring a motion this evening, which was noted as 16. I have given a heads up to staff and to council that I'm asking for a 2-week adjournment of this, so I'm bringing a motion to postpone discussion The reason for this is in 2 weeks, we will be gathered here physically at City Hall instead of half of us virtually. And I think it's a more robust and meaningful debate to be together. So that's my only reason for asking it to be adjourned for 2 weeks. So I do have a formal motion along those lines, Your Worship. May I read it now?
Go ahead.
I move that City Council postpones item 16A listed on the June 29, 2020 regular council agenda respecting the funding of police services until the July 13, 2020 regular council meeting.
Good. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Your Worship, I would just ask for a recorded vote, please.
Okay. Someone else had their hand up down there. Councillor Koepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment. I wanted to indicate that I'll not be supporting the motion to delay discussing the notice of motion, simply because the discussion needs to take place now so that staffing and potential contract apprehensions do not continue. And a resolution to this topic has been decided by council.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, so I'll go to Ms. Bloomfield to canvass council.
Councillor Gregg,
Opposed?
Councillor Hamley,
Opposed.
Councillor Koepke,
Opposed.
Councillor Merton,
Opposed.
Councillor Tamming,
In favor?
Councillor Thomas,
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary,
Opposed.
Mayor Body.
Opposed? That would bring your motion for which you gave notice June 15th up. So go ahead.
Thank you. I do have some submissions for council. They are somewhat lengthy. I have tried to organize them. Let's check my speaker here. First of all, I want to thank the scores of people that have emailed, texted, or called me in support of this motion. They know that this motion is aspirational. They know that it's uphill. But those that have contacted me, and there have been many, wish to see something different on the streets of this town. And so I thank Jim, a retired correctional officer. I thank a street nurse who corresponded with me at length. And I thank those people with mental health experience, mental health workers that are supporting this motion as well. I have not made any friends with the police. I get and I accept that. We're in a small town. One encounters, plays hockey, hangs out, sees police officers every day, especially if you're in my line of work and where your business is where mine is. This is not an easy motion to bring, but I'm bringing it nevertheless. We did something similar as a city not long ago. A different city council told the fire department, you are not taking your trucks and pumpers to go follow ambulances to every medical call. We told them, just don't do it. Don't go, you are not needed. The fire department was not happy. They argued that redundancy was necessary. They handed out brochures to the residents. They pleaded that our lives were at stake. Council at that time brushed aside those objections, and properly so. This is a little different. The average mental health or wellness check has no more need of a couple police officers than a person with a tax problem needs an electrician. It's a separate set of skills, and it's not related to the task at hand. After all, if police, for many years, people have said, tell us what you can do to cut police costs. Here's your answer. Just a few months ago, Councillor Koepke, who's on the Police Services Board, asked just that question. If you want cuts, tell us what you want. Well, here's your answer. You cut police costs by taking the policing of much of our mental health and the policing of much of our addiction in this town away. After all, you do not ask a drywaller to repoint your chimney. You ask a mason. I'm not sure why we continue to ask the police to do things for which many of them are not all that well trained. How do we know that police are often not very good at it? Maybe we could actually listen to a police officer. Just last week in the Sun Times, I trust people read this op-ed by Calgary Police wrote in that paper, we need to expand the role of mental health services so that officers are no longer in charge of mental health checks. It is often said that children are scared of our vehicles or our officers, and it's paramount that we change that perception. A child of any race, he said, this is still the police officer writing, of any race, gender, or creed should be able to approach an officer without being afraid. We have a negative in our dark uniforms. The police are not meant to make citizens sweat, but to make them feel safe. I appreciate that as a Calgary police officer. I appreciate that the facts in a small town and on the ground are somewhat different. I'm aware of that. But nevertheless, a lot of the same principles hold. I'm not drawing, I repeat, a direct corollary between what happens in the larger cities of this province and of this country and what is happening in Owen Sound. Those with ears to listen will know that when I first talked about policing about 2 years ago after the election, I specifically commended the police. I don't do criminal law much anymore, but I still encounter them from time to time. I have seen the police deal with the most delicate of situations in this town. I have seen them do stellar work with people with mental health and addictions. I had a particular client who was deeply troubled, suicidal, and I wrote a letter of commendation to the police chief at the time, commending the officer for taking hours out of his day to work with this young man at a motel and to basically leverage him to what I would call a sunnier day. I'm not naive. I know many of the local police officers, and I think they have great, great things to give this town. I just think there's a way of saving money by redirecting the funds. So that's a police officer from Calgary. We can also listen to a Toronto frontline physician who said this in the Toronto Star this past weekend. Unless a person is a threat to others, not herself or himself, police should be nowhere near that person. Or we can listen to CAMH Toronto last week, where they said police, and they adopted a policy that police should not be a first responder to mental health calls. In Eugene, Oregon, they have a simple rule: no police for mental health or addiction calls. And there, the mental health workers and medics, I understand, have only called for police backup less than 1% of the time, less than 1%. Tell that to the fearmongers. Is there a risk if an unarmed nurse speaks to an amped up person who's got a needle? Absolutely. But we can calibrate the community response to the risk at hand. The police do this all the time. They don't call in their ERT team for every person who may appear to be potentially threatening, and this is no different. So I stress again, it's not about what this councillor might think about the issues. This is not some sort of left-wing position. Those that know me will know that left-wing hardly colors my politics. I, with many others, think we're a too-policed state. I think we've come to a state where the police are too intrusive in our lives, and we call them as soon as we have trouble. Is there a better day? I urge those, or better way rather, I urge those who wish to go online and find out what CAMH says about this and find out in Eugene, Oregon, what they're doing with it. It's possible. Again, those with ears to listen will know that I have not linked this in any way with the thought that the local police are caught up in the racial issues of either the states or some of the suggested racial issues that plague Peel and Toronto police forces. I haven't mentioned any of that. I have the highest respect for the local police along those lines. I'm not aware of any systemic racism, and it's never come to my attention. That is not grounding this motion. Now let me deal with some of the objections. Some will say that 30% is a big number. I say that it's a starting salvo in negotiations. If the motion passes, we enter into negotiations as to how that number or one like it might be achieved. If those negotiations break down, off to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission we go. There are off-ramps everywhere if we are able to negotiate a revised budget on consent. The reason we don't get into the details of the police budget is because we are not allowed to. And so I'm aware it's a blunt instrument that we're trying to turn on to the police budget. I'm aware of that. The police will say that they are all about partnerships, and I accept that. The police will say, we've got this committee, we're happy to work with our mental health teams in the area. That's all true. But they will never carve several million out of their budget. They will never agree to reduce their platoons in order to pay for the mental health workers that now deal with many of their calls. Those of you who read my explanation in the paper, and I thank those who got back to me, I'm simply talking about a young girl who may be depressed, and the mother calls 911, and instead of getting a police officer or two stepping out of a vehicle with their bulletproof vests, with their tasers, with their batons, with their gun, as nice as the police may be, it's an intimidating presence, and that's what CAMH and other people in the know have said and concluded. What if that depressed girl, that adolescent, instead had a retired high school teacher, a guidance teacher, who had some additional training to deal with mental health interventions, who had a passion for adolescents, and who was able to speak with that girl over a series of coffees and leverage her to a sunnier day? Wouldn't that be a better use of taxpayers' money if such a person working on a per diem basis was the intervention that this community, and I remind people that this community is the one that polices itself. The community is the one that tries to lead to its own flourishing here. We should not be dependent upon the police for flourishing. We should think about, here's aberrant behavior, here is sad behavior, how can we deal it apart from the police? If the police don't get the call, if their calls drop off, we need less police. That would be my point. I'm almost done.
You're just to let you know, you're at 10 minutes now, so.
I hope you indulge me. This motion is, as they say, a twofer. We get a bit of tax relief on the one hand, and we get to enhance our downtown core. We get to apply the savings to a homelessness initiative. I've mentioned Indwell personally. And we get to help the downtown population with enhanced mental health and social supports. Let me again thank everyone for the support they've offered. Some have been critical, a few, and I appreciate the debate that triggers. Some have called this motion grandstanding, and I view that as a cheap ad hominem attack intended to bully the other person out of the way. The fact is that I think campaigns should mean something. I promised throughout the campaign 2 years ago to do my best to cut police and other costs. I'm trying to honor that pledge. I promised to do my best to try to make the downtown core flourish more. I'm trying to honor that pledge as well. Grandstanding, this is not grandstanding. You know what grandstanding is? Grandstanding is saying we got to do something about police. Grandstanding is commissioning an OPP report, costing report, and it's coming back and with millions in savings over the next number of years, and for some reason saying, nah, we don't want that. That's grandstanding. I also suggest that grandstanding just might be turning a budget down, as we did a few months ago, indicating great concern. And the city manager at the time told me that was the first time in memory that a city police budget had been turned down, indicating great concern that our spending was out of control. Well, this is your chance to do something about it. Some of my peers, in fact, many of my peers tonight will hammer away at this motion. I understand that. But I invite the people of this city and I invite the media to listen carefully. What are their specific proposals for cutting police? Because if there ain't none, let's remove it from the agenda. Let's stop talking about police cutting. And as far as enhancing the downtown, this is ready tax money. We can take it and apply it to the issues that we just thought of. It doesn't help to pound the table and to say we need $1 million out of policing. What helps is to just say we're cutting your budget, go find it. This is done for the sake of the many in this town that I think—
Get you to wrap up. You're approaching 15 minutes now.
That would be the end of my submissions, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Others, who wants to respond? Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too, is the councillor left the room? I'm not hearing anybody. Can you hear
Sorry,
me?
that was me. He's just going to grab a refreshment and is
All
returning
right.
to the chair now.
Okay. I too wish to thank the many individuals who responded in opposition to this motion. I will not be supporting the motion to defund Owen Sound Police Services being presented for various reasons, some of which I will explain further. Policing has changed a lot in the past 10 years. Legislation has changed such that adequacy standards are required to be met and adequate and effective policing must be provided. Provincial downloads have resulted in increased policing costs. The number of police officers per service in accordance with provincial averages equates to approximately 1.85 officers per 1,000 of population. In 2010, Owen Sound had 40 sworn officers. In 2020, there are 37 sworn officers. Owen Sound is operating just under the minimum standard threshold of number of officers, particularly when the population to be policed does not equate to just those residents who live in Owen Sound, but all others who come into or through Owen Sound on a daily basis. Because of the access of service to urbanization, Owen Sound houses the majority of individuals in Grey County under the Ontario Works Program and individuals on ODSP, as well as those seeking affordable housing opportunities. One of the biggest factors that defunding policing by 30% would not be feasible is because community agencies that deal with calls refuse to attend an unsafe environment without police to mitigate any violence, threat of violence, or potential dangerous situations. It is sad to say, but a lot of the individuals in complaint situations are known to the agencies and quite often are repeat incidents. Last year alone, police responded to 268 calls that ambulance would not respond to without police assistance as they feared for their safety. Police are often called to the hospital to assist with violent individuals who are suffering from mental health and addiction issues. Again, hospital staff are fearing for their own safety. The statement regarding Owen Sound's population being 21,000 more or less does not clearly reflect the population served by Owen Sound Police Services and does not reflect the actual cost of policing because it does not take into consideration revenue generated, grants, court facility costs, and costs recovered to offset policing costs to the taxpayer. So in fact, the budget is not 11 million as quoted. The increase in policing costs over 10 years was in fact not 35%, but was 20%, or on average 2% per year. Over the past 10 years, police have returned $634,970,000 to the city, which was an overage from the budgets over those years, another factor that has not been included in the costing provided. I won't get into fire and police comparisons, but the figures do not reflect actual costs because they include police building costs to police and do not include fire building costs to fire. Both of these buildings are owned by the city. The statement about crime having declined substantially is definitely not accurate, and in fact, most crimes have increased dramatically. What would have taken an officer an hour to do in 2010 and complete his documents takes them double, in excess of double that time now due to increased court documents and disclosure documents. The job has changed simply to maintain and complete the same investigations as 10 years ago. Calls for service in 2010 were 16,146, when in 2019 there were 17,510 calls for service, an increase of 6%. Charges laid in 2010 were 1,528, and in 2019 charges laid were 2,107, which is an increase of over 37%. Latest statistics indicate the City of Owen Sound was third in the province out of 50 municipal police services with respect to the number of criminal charges processed per officer per year, with its officers processing 54.8 criminal charges per officer, while the provincial and national averages were 23.3 and 29.7 respectively. Both criminal and non-criminal crimes have increased and created an increased demand on police services. If there were appropriate alternatives in place that showed a reduced demand for service and the ability to remove workload from policing, then it would be possible to evaluate what would be an effective complement to handle the volume of calls and services. But until those alternatives are in place and working, there will be no expected decrease in calls for service. As legislated by the Attorney General, Council of Police Services are being required to develop a community safety and well-being plan. Owen Sound Police Services has been a wealth of assistance to the Planning Committee in developing this plan. Owen Sound Police Service already has in place a situation table response team, which is working together with other agencies, other municipalities in Grey County, and the Planning Committee to carry out the work and develop the community safety and well-being plan. The plan is coming together quite well and will soon be ready for public consultation. The City of Owen Sound Police Services have a protocol agreement in place, and discussions need to take place between these two teams, between the city and police service. Given that 90% of policing costs are related to salaries and benefit, there is not much left to reduce. Other alternatives or solutions need to be discussed prior to any rash cutting of the police budget by 30%, with these funds being directed toward mental health. I would be interested to hear what Canadian Mental Health Association Ray Bruce has to say about the approach proposed by the councillor, given that they will not respond to potentially dangerous situations without police present. Police service meetings are open to the public, but rarely do we see any members of the public, or in particular, any members of council who may have a future interest in serving on the board to provide their opinion or gain knowledge of the operations of the Owen Sound Police Service. That's all for now, Your Worship, and I repeat, I will not be supporting this motion and urge others to take into consideration the facts that are presented. And I would also request that a recorded vote be taken.
So I erred just before we go any further. We failed to get Councillor Tramming to actually move his motion after his submissions. So I will ask him to move the motion itself now, so it's on the table.
Just calling it up. So I'm skipping the recitals, and I'm asking for a motion saying, be it resolved that City Council, 1, effectively defunds police services by 30% by providing notice to the Owen Sound Police Services Board that will not approve that any future city police budget which exceeds 7.5 million, and 2, direct staff to apply those budgetary savings to both tax savings and to enhance supports for those with addictions, those with mental health challenges, and those that are homeless.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to go back to Councillor Kepke again. You asked for a recorded vote. I'm not sure you could say that until we put the motion on, so I'll just get you to repeat that just so I'm covering our rule.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I would request that this be a recorded vote.
Good. Okay, thank you. Other councillors wish to speak. I see Councillor Gregg's hand going up.
Thank you for the opportunity, Your Worship. And I voted against delaying this because I started preparing this statement effectively the moment the last council meeting ended. Councillor Tamming, you called it a wave, let's ride it. So you did parallel US and big cities in your motion. On May 8th, I ran 2 miles as part of Run with Ahmad in remembrance of Ahmaud Arbery, who was a homicide victim and likely victim of racism in the United States. In late May, video revealed a police officer taking the life of a suspect rather than properly placing him in custody as a suspect in the committing of a crime. I did not say the race of the police officer for a reason. Regardless of any nationality or ethnicity, what occurred was not proper policing by every measuring stick available. I did not watch the video as I do not need to see someone suffer and die. I think it is demeaning in the same way documentaries showcase homicidal maniacs appearing on Netflix. Police chiefs in the United States and Canada denounced the actions of the officer, and their justice system, similar to ours, will take effect and pass judgment, as it should. Ben Crump is the attorney representing the Floyd family. As an individual who has made it his profession to apply the law against the citizen and to represent the citizen against the law, it is of tremendous concern that while acting as a lawyer, he has advocated against the exact legal system which he was to protect. That is a system which does not exact immediate justice against the accused. I can think of many criminals who personally I would have saved the trial and the costs occurred by it. Paul Bernardo, Luca Magnotta come to mind. Even O.J. Simpson comes to mind. However, in the latter case, it appeared that the glove did not fit. Our legal system is one which ensures that the process will endure, regardless of the severity of the crime, whether I personally agree with it or not. The comments of Ben Crump were to undermine that system. Further, poor decision-making on the part of the Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey in allowing the behavior of rioters to result in burning the police precinct accomplished nothing other than to empower the individuals who seize on these opportunities to rampage and loot, inflicting injury on innocent people. There is a real difference between peaceful and respectful protesters and empowered rioters. Congratulations to the peaceful and respectful individuals who raised awareness in Owen Sound recently on the subject of racism. Now, to leave the United States, and thank goodness we live where we do, we recently had a fatal shooting in Toronto right downtown during the day, which killed a man. This gun battle occurred right in front of a mother and over top of an innocent 6-year-old boy on the sidewalk. About the same time, a female leapt to her death from an apartment building in Toronto. Rather than protest the fact a shooting should not occur downtown, people without any facts other than the comments of the victim's family and resultant of what was going on in the United States leaped on the anti-police bandwagon. Almost all family members want what is best for other family members. Even the mother of Luca Magnotta, according to the news, wanted him to be released from prison because of COVID. I do not think that would be a good idea. 2 weeks ago, the family of a drowned man escaping from the police in Deshard, Tennessee, blamed the officers for his death, despite the danger of going in the river without support in the dark. This has become ludicrous, the microphone the media has given people, particularly social media, against the police. Interestingly, and because it occurred in the public realm, I can comment on it as it happened less than 24 hours after your motion, Councillor Tammy. I had a customer comment on a female being punched on 8th Street East beside my business midday. Upon going out, I saw the young black man and knew exactly what was going on, as I have seen this boy have strong episodes from his autism in the past. While 4 pedestrians sought refuge in my business, the young man threw another lady to the street in the middle of 8th Street and then punched a close family member before throwing her to the sidewalk. While men were getting out of their vehicles to consider containment, the family member continued to attempt to calm an individual who was not only a danger to the public, but also to themselves. This person was in vehicles, including a funeral procession, prior to being properly restrained by responding police. Imagine yourself, Councillor Tamming, being the first vehicle behind the funeral director, having someone attacking your vehicle, trying to break your wipers off. I had 2 social workers in my store during the episode who agreeably spoke to the necessity of properly trained police officers as essential to the safe apprehension of the young man, who is a lovely and special fellow from a wonderful family. Now imagine trying to restrain safely a 220-pound, 6'1" person who may be biting and or spitting, while a citizen in 2020 has a cell phone zoomed in on the situation. A person who, without any knowledge of the scene, waits seconds to upload to social media what they think they saw without all the facts. Even our Prime Minister piled on regarding this issue. When he received comments from the most educated individual running the police force regarding systemic racism, he announced otherwise. That type of occurrence happens repeatedly by the American president, and the media, rightfully so, attempts to hold him to account. However, here the Prime Minister escapes the media due to the political correctness and sensitivity of the matter. Later that same day, I spent nearly an hour with a resident listening to their concerns regarding drugs and individuals consuming them in their neighborhood. While mental health counselors are a resource for some in the community, This is an example where that counselor is not going into this place without police presence. We have an existing need for police, and I fear your motion would actually increase our costs in the long term. I have no issue with looking closely at any city department and the resources which they are allocated. However, I would like to highlight quickly from the 10-year tally sheet for departmental budgets the following, which I grabbed in mainly random order. Increases to council of 32.7%, library 40%, art gallery 47%, animal control 147%, bylaws 65%, airport 117%, cemetery 156%, fire 43.9%, and police net 20%. I support your investigative thinking and challenging inquisitive questioning, Councillor Tammy. As cost containment is essential, we as a council must not lose sight on certain fundamentals required for growth. Endless growth in itself is not sustainable, but we have capacity and it must remain our central focus. You may not at your residence think you have the same need for policing. However, I do appreciate that the level of policing and the work of our fine police officers, and I will repeat that because police officers across the country and the United States have been unfairly, uniformly tarred the last month. The fine work of our police officers has resulted in the apprehension of a theft from our building prior to the suspect leaving the yard, the apprehension of an extremely violent man charged with attempted murder immediately outside my business after having been in it, the importance placed on speed reduction for safe streets, how officers held the arms of a mentally ill male threatening to jump from a second floor for an extended period of time, and I could go on and on. Police departments have been for years looking at common best practices to escape deploying resources to calls where they are hopeful of better alternatives, and they will continue to do that. They do not want to execute the work of other agencies if alternatives exist. When an opportunity to serve on the police board arrives in the future, I urge you to not pass it, rather enlighten yourself to the parameters established by the Comprehensive Police Services Act, a 19-part Bill 68 prefaced, an act with respect to community safety and policing. But as long as individuals such as Rohini Besessar, who stabbed an innocent civilian to death at a Shoppers Drug Mart in Toronto a few years ago, or Brady Robertson, who killed a beautiful Brampton family a week ago, exist, then we have a need for the expertise and trained response of police officers. I, Councillor Gregg, will not be supporting the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Put your hand up. Any other councillors?
That's Councillor Merton.
Councillor Merton, go ahead.
To Councillor Tamming. Right service, right place, right time, right result. The core mandate of police services is clearly defined in legislation by the Police Services Act. Over many years, role and scope creep has occurred due to changing social service funding, increased community needs, and safety expectations relating to poverty, addictions, homelessness, and mental health issues. The police answer the call by the nature of their 24/7 service delivery model. Here in Owen Sound, our police service has been recognized as a provincial exemplar in its ability to network and partner with others in healthy communities initiatives. But it is time to review that model, to re-examine how programs and services are delivered, including using tools to measure accountability, quality and performance measurement, and effectiveness. We need to measure what matters to our community and effectively manage what we measure. We need an action-focused, goal-directed group to move this forward, and we need to examine the impact of being a regional center for mental health and addictions treatment centers to ensure accurate comparisons. This is a community issue, not just a policing issue, and it requires an informed, action-oriented solution. Many of the social service and mental health community programs are funded, some would say chronically underfunded, by the province. They are not the mandate nor fiscal responsibility of the municipality. The question then needs to be asked, how do we as a council, a municipality, and a community advocate for provincial funding for these services to meet our growing and changing needs? We are missing key pieces of information to make an informed decision regarding this motion. We need the Community Safety and Wellbeing Report and its recommendations. We've heard tonight that is still in process, and we will be receiving that report. We need to hear from current service agencies about whether they have the adequate resources available to meet a 24/7 model of care and the changing landscape of community needs. And not just to hear, but to understand what the police services are telling us about our community here in Owen Sound. Selecting a percentage and a dollar figure to amputate from the police services budget may make a point, but based on the phrasing of the motion, the targets and time frame, and the lack of a backup plan, based on that, I will not be supporting this motion.
We'll call the question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas, go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'd like to thank Councillor Tamming for his motion. Your passion for this subject is obvious and your commitment is admirable. I haven't experienced a groundswell of support for it, as you may have. Now, I didn't make the motion, so that's not unusual. I just want to mention that 5 years ago, I was the one who brought forward the OPP costing motion. When we decided to stay with our local police force after examining the ins and outs of that, I also made the motion to ask the police to find the approximate $1 million in savings that the OPP indicated we could experience. That has yet to be achieved. We challenged Chief Ambrose on this at our 2020 budget discussions, and in fact, you, Councillor Tamming, were right in there pressing for this issue. Quite rightfully, the chief pointed out that he had only been 6 months in the job, and he asked us for a chance to have a look at things and to address our concerns. That's good enough for me right now. I'm willing to wait and see what the chief comes back with. I have a keen interest in seeing some budgetary control being brought to bear in police services and other emergency services, but I could not support a broad 30% cut to any city department without knowing the full implications ahead of time. So for that reason, I will not be supporting your motion, but I would encourage you at budget time again this year to continue on the issue. And I would also encourage you to take the opportunity early in the new year, when we all have the opportunity to pick committees that we'd like to sit on, take a shot at police services and get in there where your voice can be heard. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Your Worship. You've all heard this song before, and I don't mind repeating. When I was elected in 2014, I spent the first few months learning how to be a councillor. That included many hours in Peter Lemon's kitchen, Arlene Wright's living room, as well as many, many cups of coffee with Jim McManaman. The advice was plenty, but the most important point was this. You have to engage with other councillors. You have to phone them. You have to meet with them and build relationships. You get nothing done or accomplished by yourself. What was never mentioned was publicly insulting members of the police board or council members, or putting an editorial in the Sun-Times publicly insulting members of your own council. That brings me to the notice of motion before us. To the best of my knowledge, Councillor Tamming has not made a single phone call or sat down with anyone on council in an effort to hear other viewpoints. Sadly, it appears that the only discussions he's had are with the media, but none with the people that are making this decision. There seems to be a common theory here. So Councillor Tamming has made 6 points, the most of which are inaccurate, either directly in the motion or in the media in relation to the motion. Let's go through them one by one. The first, he said we have a whopping 40 full-time police officers. The fact is, 10 years ago we had 40 police officers. Today we have 37. That is a savings of more than $300,000. Number two, we have 22 full-time civilians and 14 special constables. The fact is, we have 22 full-time civilians and only 12 special constables. Number three, we have a budget approaching $11 million, which has increased at double the rate of inflation for the last decade. The fact is, the actual budget related to the levy in 2011 was $6,566,797, and the budget in 2020 is $7,894,533, which is an increase of 20% over the 10-year period. It is also important to note, as Councillor Kepke has already said, that $634,970 was returned to the city from the police services during that 10 years. So again, worth repeating, that's 20% increase over 10 years, and the cost of living increase was 17.44%. That's an awful long way from double. Number four, serious local crime has declined markedly over the last decade. I think not. The fact is, the total number of charges laid over the 10-year period increased by 37.89%. Violent crime over the 10-year period increased by 58.06%. And property crime increased by 50.93%. And don't forget, we have 3 less police officers than we did 10 years ago. Number five, do we really need 35 to 40 uniformed police officers making $100,000 driving around in $100,000 cruisers and SUVs? The fact is, the number of $100,000 vehicles in the police services fleet is 0. The 4 years I served on the police board, there was not even a vehicle at $50,000. Number six, the Owen Sound Police Services Board and Owen Sound City Council has proven itself unable or unwilling, yes, unwilling to force police services to seriously reduce its spending. This is a direct personal hit on previous board members and city council who reduced the number of uniformed police officers by 3, went through an OPP costing, and put police services through a full service review. When I was elected in 2014, I, like Councillor Tamming, campaigned on reducing costs with emergency services. When I drew the #1 tag while picking our committees, I used the first pick overall to put myself on the police board. I wanted to learn the business, and I wanted to make a difference. And I stayed on that board for 4 years. So what's ironic about this is Councillor Tamming drew the #1 tag when he was first elected. Did he use this to put himself on the police board? Nope. He picked the art gallery. He could have had that with his 4th pick, but that's okay if that's what he wanted. But if you're going to make statements like the Owen Sound Police Board members and council members has proven itself unable or unwilling to reduce police service spending, then I ask you, Councillor Tamming, why are you not on the police board? In conclusion, I am proud to have been on the team that hired Craig Ambrose as our police chief. He is first and foremost a community guy. He's a character guy, and he doesn't mind answering the tough questions. The last time Chief Ambrose was in the council chambers, we as a council unanimously made a commitment to the chief, and he committed to us to sit down and have a serious conversation about the kind of police service that we want. This has never been done before. And while COVID-19 has delayed this meeting, that commitment remains. This notice of motion is a direct breach of the commitment we made with Chief Ambrose, and I will not support it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Now, is there anyone else? I think Councillor Hamley, you're the only one I don't see on the list. Did you want to speak to it?
I would, Your Worship. We all know that police services is hugely expensive. It's a very common problem right across this province. It's not unique to Owen Sound. I stood with Councillor Tamming when he moved to send the police budget back to the Police Services Board, and I stood with him when he tried to resend it back again. And he can say up and down that he's not using the current situation that we're in the world. But the reality is he's using a genuinely horrific American event to slash the police services budget by almost $4 million, effectively crippling the police services ability to protect our community. There is such a thing as too far, and I cannot support this motion.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none. Councillor Tamming, I'll get you to wrap up quickly.
And I'll be quick. I'm disappointed, but not at all surprised. I think this could have been the opening to a new community approach to addressing our problems. Councillor Koepke and Greg paint a frightening, violent, and sometimes horrific picture of our downtown core. If they're right, and if crime has rocketed downtown in recent years, maybe we should try a different approach to policing. Just saying. As for Mr. O'Leary, I sense a lot of personal animus there. I'm not going to get into it. The fact is I volunteered to be on the police board. Ms. Koepke wanted to be on it. That's just a fact. You can check the website. It says police, it says 40 officers. The police vehicles are much more expensive than what he says. I find the insult that he threw my way, I'm not going to respond to it. I'm very fond of Mr. O'Leary. I think he brings a lot of passion to this town, but for him to insult me in the way he did, I think it personalized things unnecessarily. I have never said anything critical about the police chief. I have never said anything critical about the police force. Again, tonight, I spent 5 minutes repeating an anecdote that I had from the police. In my experience, that they're very, very good at many things. I'm sad, though, that Mr. O'Leary chose to use the personal attack. It's disappointing.
Sorry, I'm going to get you to focus on the motion.
What I think would have helped is if, like Ms. Merton, other councils, including Mr. O'Leary, would have dealt with the simple issue. When you have a troubled adolescent looking for help, when you have somebody outside your store who's not the horrific person that Mr. Gregg pointed out, isn't there a better way than calling 911? And that is being reconsidered across North America. And it has nothing to do in this case with the race issue, and it's insulting to suggest so. I thank everybody for the quality of this debate. I have tried repeatedly, and Mr. O'Leary knows this, to communicate to councillors through emails or visits or phone calls. We have a perception on this council, though, with all respect, Your Worship, and I've mentioned this, that you can't discuss policy, you can't discuss ideas outside of a formal meeting lest you're offside the ombudsman. That's a fact. Nobody has pressed more than I have for private conversations, for camaraderie, for trying to get
Again, I'll get you to focus on your motion.
So, sorry, sir?
I'll get you to focus on your motion,
Okay.
not something that some other councillor said.
It is relevant because I'm being accused here of not being open for a living. I'm open to facts, I'm open to data. If Mr. O'Leary wants to read it different or other councillors, that's too bad.
Well, hold on. Please focus on the motion, not on another councillor or their statement.
I've responded to their critiques. And again, I think it's a sad day for Owen Sound that we didn't use this opportunity.
Good, thank you. I'll get you to call the question, your canvas.
Councillor Gregg,
Opposed?
Councillor Hanley,
Opposed.
Councillor Koepke,
Opposed.
Councillor Merton,
Opposed?
Councillor Tamming,
In favor?
Councillor Thomas,
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary,
Opposed.
Mayor Body.
Opposed?
The resolution is defeated with 7 opposed and 1 in favor.
Great, thank you. If we can move on, discussion of additional business was, I think, Councillor Thomas first with 3 items.
Thanks, Your Worship. We've had a lot of questions at the public library about why we're not open to the public quite yet. And I just wanted to explain so that everyone's aware, we do have our curbside pickup open, but in fact, under the way the government's rules work right now, we could in fact let people into the library, but they could not touch the books. So it seemed rather odd to us to go to all the expense and trouble and cleaning that we would have to do to allow people into the library when in fact they can't touch the books. So as soon as you're allowed to touch the books, we'll be moving forward with our reopening plan. I did want to draw everyone's attention to the Climate Change Action Plan survey that Grey County has going. That survey is live until Friday, July the 3rd, and it is presently, rather than reading out the link, it has been sent out through the city's social media channels this evening, and it will be up on our homepage tomorrow morning for people who want to have a say in the face and shape of climate action change in Grey County. And my final item, Your Worship, revolves around a fundraiser that I'm really, really looking forward to, and I'm quite sure you are too, and it is a Beards for Bucks, beard shave off that a number of local politicians are taking part in, including Councillor Gregg, yourself, Mayor Boddy, myself and Councillor Dodd, Bill Walker, Alex Ruff MP, John Woodbury, the Mayor of Southgate, Selwyn Hicks, the Hanover Deputy Mayor, Akash Desai, the Grey Highlands Deputy Mayor. And we're all raising money that will go to the Critical Response Fund for COVID-19 of the Grey Bruce Health Services Hospital Foundation. So the shave off is on July 11th, and we're looking for people to pay to help us get these itchy, scratchy beards off that really are horrifying to have under a mask.
Capital O-S-H.
Oh, golly, you were going to ask that, and I didn't write it down. But
capital O-S-H, so Owen Sound Hospital, and then it's smallblocksfoundation.ca. If you go in and see the picture of Councillor Dodd, who's not here to defend himself, you'll realize that he's the guy you should put some money behind because he looks really scary.
It is pretty frightening, I will admit.
And the problem is his beard isn't white, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Your Worship. That's all I have tonight.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Kepke, you had two items.
Worship. Two items regarding police services. One is a media release. On June the 18th, Owen Sound Police Services issued a media release entitled Agencies Collaborate in Ongoing Battle Against Opioid Epidemic. This media release was unfortunately not the topic of being newsworthy on the day it was released, given that other worldly news took precedence. I would urge the media to go back into their records and pick up the story this release identifies. It comments about a public awareness and intervention that was conducted on the heels of a recent suspected drug overdose and death. Members of the Grey Bruce Public Health Unit partnered with Mobile Mental Health and Addiction Response Team to distribute naloxone kits. Literature and safer drug use, as well as education regarding the Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act. MHART is comprised of an Owen Sound police officer and a worker from Canadian Mental Health, Grey Bruce. The particular residence in question that was attended to is well known to many in Owen Sound, and believe me, neighbors are extremely concerned and fearing for their safety. The officials who attended the intervention offered guidance to a number of citizens dealing with complex issues related to a variety of areas, including addiction, mental health, and housing. The collaboration is part of an ongoing strategy amongst local agencies to reduce incidents of harmful and tragic outcomes that can result from the abuse of toxic opioid narcotics, including fentanyl. This incident alone identifies the excellent working relationship between Owen Sound Police Services and Canadian Mental Health, Grey Bruce. As well, Your Worship, I encourage members of council, members of the public, and members of the media to visit the Owen Sound Police Services website to view the recently released 2019 annual report. And the website is www.owensoundpolice.com. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Kepke. I think it's down to me. So I can hardly go through a meeting without talking about COVID-19. We've done very well up here in Grey and Bruce, and especially in Owen Sound, with one heck of an effort sacrificed by our community. We've protected each other and ourselves by keeping the number of cases very low here, but we know that the coronavirus is still here in Canada and Ontario, and especially in Toronto. We know that people from Toronto will come and visit us no matter what we try and do. And, you know, they're going to. We have to continue to, well, just let me stop there. The last couple of days, if you have been following media south of the border, how easy it can turn on us, how we've got to remain disciplined and keep going forward. It is summer, it's great to be outside, but I encourage everyone to keep safe distance, wash your hands often. I heard from somebody that was kind of nervous going into the store that the store staff didn't have masks on. If you're in a store and you're working, please be ready to put a mask on, because not everyone is comfortable coming in and shopping in your store, and we don't want them going online and shopping elsewhere. I also want to take this moment to pass along our appreciation to the Mayor and Council of South Bruce Peninsula for having to make a very tough decision in the last few days with regard to Sauble Beach, and it was really made on behalf of all of us in the region. If any of us elected could guarantee the safety of our community, the decisions would be very easy. Whether everyone agrees with the decision or not, we know how difficult that one was, and we say thank you to Mayor Jackson and the council up there. It's a tough decision, and we're with you. Two things. This is a kind of a neat time of the year for Canadians. One celebration is June 28th, 1981 was the day that Terry Fox died after coming off the road in around Thunder Bay. It's 39 years already, and I had the number of, I think it's something like $750 million that's been raised worldwide. I had it and didn't write it down. Amazing what one young man did for our country, for our world. I was living in Edmonton at the time, and there was such a buzz about him coming. Steve Fonyo came after that. Huge to be in the prairies and see the overwhelming Canadian spirit for these three people as they came through. But Terry Fox has certainly lasted the longest, and it's hard to believe it's been 39 years for some of us. So I wish to everybody on behalf of Council in Owen Sound and throughout Grey and Bruce a very happy Canada Day. On Wednesday, we will celebrate the 153rd anniversary of Confederation and the 100th anniversary of the incorporation of Owen Sound as a city. It will be a great day to be thankful. By far, we live in the best city in the best country, Canada. It's unfortunate that we are unable to gather as we have in the past years. However, we can all join together and think about how much we have been grateful, how much we can be grateful for in our beautiful community. Let us continue our respect for human rights and equality, our love of humanity, multicultural society, to the benefit of everyone in Canada. This year, the federal government is hosting, which includes virtual fireworks at 10 p.m. Take time to gather within your own social bubble at home. Have a wonderful celebration. Happy Canada Day, everyone. Stay safe, stay active. Thanks.
Before I bring this motion, Your Worship, I just want to say that that was a very powerful tribute to being Canadian and to our resilience, and you're to be commended, Your Worship. I appreciate that, and I'm sure the people of the city do.
Thank you.
Moved by John Tamming that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
Great. Councillor Gregg.
In favor.
Councillor Hamley.
In favor.
Councillor Kepke.
In favor.
Councillor Merton.
In favor.
Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
In favor.
Councillor Tamming.
In favor.
Councillor Thomas.
In favor.
So that is carried. We're now back into the formal sessions. Number 19, motion to adopt proceedings in committee of the whole.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thomas, that the action taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business be confirmed by this council.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gregg.
In favor?
Councillor Hamley.
In favor?
Councillor Kepke.
Favor.
Councillor Merton.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
In favor.
Councillor Tamming.
In favor.
Councillor Thomas.
In favor.
So that is carried. We're down to number 20, notices of motion. Councillor Thomas, I'll ask you to take the chair. As we've had discussions over, well, certainly over the last 2 weeks with regard to policing, we had discussions and motions in late January. There is a letter or a statement out from the chair of the Owen Sound Police Services Board, Mr. Thompson, acknowledging that it is time for change and it's going to have to be a reasonable change. I point out that our police services is recognized across the province for the work that they are doing with the CMHC's, Canadian Mental Health Association. There you go, I've got it spelled wrong. Addictions Response Team. We've got a protocol agreement to maintain dialogue. So with that, I give notice that at the next meeting on July 13th, I will move that the city manager prepare terms of reference to create a transformational task force that will inform council how to best modernize the structure and service delivery options of the Owen Sound Police Services, which will lead to delivering police services more efficiently and effectively to the citizens of Owen Sound. Thank you. This was supposed to go to you before I started. Bylaws, Ms. Bloomfield.
Sorry. Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to establish the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, bylaw to execute a site plan agreement with John Laughlin for property at 873 2nd Ave East, being the former Scopus lot, a bylaw to execute a site plan agreement with Roman Kovac for property at 1684 9th Ave East, being the Tom Sioux townhouses, a bylaw to execute an amending agreement with Grey Bruce Health Services respecting a temporary hospital at the Bayshore Community Center, and lastly, a bylaw to execute a contribution agreement with Tourism Industry Association of Ontario respecting the Regional Relief Recovery Fund.
Thank you. Councillor Tamming, last motion.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thomas, that bylaws number 2020-067, 2020-068, 2020-069, 2020-070, 2020-071, and 2020-072 be passed and enacted.
Great, thank you. In favor or opposed, Councillor Gregg?
In favor?
Councillor Hamley?
In favor?
Councillor Kepke?
In favor.
Councillor Merton?
In favor?
Ryan, you there?
Yeah, in favor.
Good, thank you. Councillor Tamming?
In favor?
Councillor Thomas?
In favor.
So bylaws carry. It is now 9:05. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Good meeting. Happy Canada Day.
Kate.
Has left the meeting.